Hi, my name is Dr. Rachel Bolton-King and I'm an Associate Professor of Forensic Science at Staffordshire University. Today I'm going to talk to you about firearm investigations and improving the timeliness and effectiveness of those investigations, particularly in the context of the UK. This presentation and the talk is all about my Churchill Fellowship and the research that I undertook in the United States, South Africa and France, as well as my experience working with practitioners in the UK and more recently working with our National Ballistics Intelligence Service, NABIS, in order to support lower gun crime counties in the UK and try and further explore how we can further improve timeliness and effectiveness with them. So we're going to cover a range of different aspects today, focusing on different solutions and systems and trying to identify what the main challenges and opportunities are for improving timeliness and effectiveness. Then I'm going to finish with looking at some of the recommendations, particularly for the UK, but also considering this on an international scale and proposing some actions that we can hopefully further discuss in our action planning workshop this afternoon. So when it comes to firearm investigations, over the last 20 years or so, there have been a whole range of different technologies that have been created, implemented, tested, not only in the UK but internationally, which are typically divided into detection-based systems, firearm identification systems and investigative solutions. These three sectors need to work together, and a range of different manufacturers and systems and solutions may exist and to support us as humans, as individuals, working within the criminal justice system to help detect, investigate, hopefully solve and hopefully also prevent future firearm incidents. So I'm not going to discuss each of these technologies in detail, but I've been able to, during my fellowship, actually go to meet some of these technology companies, see these technologies in action in various different socio-economic climates and also different gun crime contexts as well. In terms of detection and reporting of firearm related offences and the presence and collection of firearm related evidence, we can utilise both more covert methods to do that, as well as more non-destructive and sometimes covert methods as well. In terms of the laboratory side, the firearms analysis and identification side, there are the traditional methods such as comparison microscopy, but also moving to more modern and timely three-dimensional imaging methods which can be used to support firearm examiners in helping to identify that one gun may have been used in various different shooting incidents. There's also new technology being trialled in the US looking at triaging and determining how many different guns have actually been used in one shooting incident, particularly, for example, in mass shootings or shootings involving a number of different individuals and gang on gang or blue on blue shooting. And also looking at more open source resources such as like IMDb, but for firearms, to try and actually look at any videos, social media clips, to try and actually link perpetrators with the firearms in those videos. In terms of investigation, there's also methods to identify high density crime regions and also try and identify potential individuals that would be able to maybe provide information and intelligence to the police, and also to try and identify where the biggest groups or the connections are between individuals based on the information within police databases, for example. But all of those three areas and the technologies and the individuals working within each of the parts of the criminal justice system have to work together in order to prevent and try and reduce gun and firearm related criminal. In terms of being able to succeed at trying to reduce violent crime, trying to reduce the number of firearm-related incidents, it's all about using the people, the processes, and the technology. This isn't necessarily a new concept. It's been shared and is being emphasised for a number of years, but it's not necessarily been actioned very well and holistically across criminal justice systems across the globe. And for me, the key part of this this triangle, these three stages that are actually absolutely critical to all working effectively together, is actually the people, because the people are often the barriers that I've found and that I've spoken to practitioners about, in terms of being able to see that change is needed, to support individuals working on the ground to implement change, to empower them to decide what processes, what practices, what policies, what technologies in their area may be the most effective and appropriate for implementation, and then also to be able to fund them, to source the right people to work together to implement that, to evaluate it, and also to then share those best practices as well. So for me, fundamentally, the people are one of the key aspects that really need to be focused and prioritised, because without the people and the processes, any technology that gets implemented is very unlikely to actually succeed. When I've been doing my research and talking with practitioners, particularly those that are police officers and maybe less exposed and experienced with firearms, particularly in the UK where firearms aren't part of our everyday society, for example, actually there seems to be a heavy focus on firearms as the type of physical evidence itself, and there is really good initiatives and programs and drives to trace firearms and to identify where those firearms are coming from, try and curb the demand and the supply of those firearms. But there's not been so much about the actual ammunition itself, and therefore there really needs to be a greater emphasis on that ammunition, which is a consumable. You know, without that ammunition, it is going to be harder for firearms to be used to cause bloodshed and the more serious offences. A firearm by itself that cannot fire a projectile is only capable of being used as blunt force trauma or to elicit threat, which, although obviously quite serious as well, those types of offences aren't as there's not as much resourcing in policing to investigate them as effectively and as holistically as there is with the more serious related bloodshed. So when I've been conducting this research and talking with practitioners across the globe, there are significant challenges and practice inconsistencies that happen both within a country and between countries as well. I've found both in the UK and internationally, there's this big inconsistency in understanding what the terminology that's being used actually is. So experts, firearm experts in the laboratory, for example, may use some specific terminologies around describing firearms themselves and ammunition that maybe the police officers aren't aware of. They are using potentially misleading or incorrect terminology when inputting that data into their databases, and also trying to then search for those associated incidents, modus operandi, and trying to identify and analyse the crime data actually within those databases. And that's causing a significant issue in the UK as well as internationally. Some countries are obviously focusing on shooting and investigating those individual shootings rather than focusing on generating the intelligence to try and actually reduce those shootings happening in the first place, or the actual supply and demand of where those firearms and ammunition are actually coming from. So particularly focusing on one type of firearm offence, again, isn't an ideal approach to trying to tackle all crime associated with firearms and ammunition. In terms of the processes and the technologies and the databases that are being utilised, again, not only within a country but also between countries, there are significant barriers to sharing data. And whilst there is some good work trying to be done to break down those barriers, even in technology companies themselves, we're still a long way for us being able to get across those barriers effectively. And also, there are understandably political and historical reasons that countries themselves may not be happy to actually share the data that they have, even ballistics data, which doesn't necessarily have any human information or case-specific information actually contained within it. And as a result, this fear, this lack of trust between countries is again making it difficult to not only investigate trafficking, but also investigate crimes that are happening across any border, not only between counties or countries, but within them as well. The forensic data that is being generated by ballistics labs, again, is not being well utilised, and it's not well understood across the globe within the policing context. And so there is, and I think this is one of the biggest areas that we could actually seek to improve. And whilst some forces and some law enforcement agencies are really great at doing this, it's not holistic and consistent even within a country. There are really big issues with can be staff motivation, particularly in high gun crime regions, because they're not necessarily getting feedback on the work that they're doing and how their role is impacting on the rest of the criminal justice system. And again, whilst we advocate provision of feedback, so prosecutors, defence attorneys or lawyers providing that feedback to experts who are giving expert testimony, forensic laboratory staff giving that feedback back to CSI giving that feedback to police officers, etc. The police officers giving that information and that value to the community. Without that feedback happening, people may get demotivated and not know really what the value and the importance of their work and their role actually is, unless they follow up on those criminal justice outcomes directly themselves. And so this could be an area as well that often gets deprioritised and put to the bottom of the pack, when actually that could be one of the key drivers to influencing change. You also have issues where parts of the criminal justice system are just less effective, and it is an entire chain. If one part of the chain is working really, really well, it then won't have the impact that it should have in terms of criminal justice outcomes if maybe the prosecution side aren't as strong, or the investigative side aren't as strong as the laboratory, or any of one of those particular sectors not quite being as effective and efficient as they could be, and not having those really close working relationships to make that work. So in terms of generating intelligence, this is one of the areas I think really could work with, using the systems that we already have, using the policies and the processes, but trying to improve on the actual data that's actually going into some of those databases, particularly those that are police databases, whether they're within a county or a region, or whether they're operating between agencies. We need to get better at using consistent language and making sure that language is the right language, the best terminology. So for example, not just saying gun, what type of gun, is it a pistol? Is it a revolver? Was it a blank firer? Was it an imitation firearm? Actually improving some of the understanding and the awareness and the training associated with being able to actually identify those. And this will really help us gather better intelligence around emerging trends and particular types of firearms and ammunition that are being utilised in crime, and the geography and the time of when those crimes are actually occurring. In terms of intelligence from the forensic data perspective as well, this is where we can really use 3D imaging systems and computer databases to try and link cases together. There's this misconception that if you link cases together, that it makes a greater amount of work, whereas actually it's a better allocation of resources. Organisations and evaluations such as the Crime Gun Intelligence centres in the US are demonstrating. And this is all about actually, rather than having lots and lots of little teams or a selection of big teams working on individual shootings, actually pooling those resources together and linking those cases together and providing really timely intelligence around potential for those cases to be linked together is really, really vital, because police and investigators need that intelligence for all types of firearm related offence, not just those that are urgent or priority cases, in less than 48 hours. And if we can try and get that valuable intelligence to those investigators in a much more timely way, then they can gather the wider evidence and whether that's information-based evidence from individuals or whether it's more physical evidence, they can actually get that much more effectively, and they will help to build their investigations much, much better. And the other aspect is it's not all around shootings. There are a wide range of firearm related offences that, again, people don't necessarily think about, or they may not have the training and the experience to actually appreciate that that is actually occurring. So if officers are raiding a property or a commercial area, etc., they may not know that actually some of that equipment is for manufacturing, converting, reactivating firearms. It could be reloading ammunition, it could be manufacturing ammunition from scratch, it could be assembling firearm components and or ammunition as well. So there's the whole aspect around clandestine manufacture and illegal manufacturing in terms of the supply and the source of those illegal activities. There's also theft of firearms and ammunition, and trying to identify exactly where that source of firearm and ammunition is coming from is really vital. And so actually associating and linking cases with the theft of firearms, or firearms that have seemingly no longer being, like the licenses aren't being renewed, things like that, again, could provide vital intelligence and links to investigators that may not be currently being explored as fully as they could be. So it's not just possession of firearms and getting firearms off the streets, whilst that's really important. It is also about trying to determine whether there's any forensic evidence and value in firearms and ammunition that's also been buried and disposed of, stored, hidden, and that often appears in a corroded state, and maybe using non-destructive methods like X-ray scanning, for example, to actually determine the safety of those firearms and the ammunition, and also determining whether there's any potential forensic value that might remain, that therefore those items need to be sent for further analysis. Another area that I've seen really help investigators is really creating visual diagrams and methods to communicate trends, high density regions of firearm related crime, linking firearms and or fired bullets and cartridge cases together to demonstrate how cases are linked. And the image at the bottom is looking at social network analysis. So this is about looking at what data the database currently has. So information from witness statements, information from lab reports, information from various sources, and linking those and connecting those people or those geographic locations, those crimes together in a very different way. So again, software that most police have access to, but are we actually making sure that we're using that technology to its maximum capability and capacity in order to help us identify crimes and help us to identify shooters or associates that we might be able to tap into for intelligence. So my key recommendations, based on the research that we've been doing, is primarily around trying to improve police training and awareness, and improving that consistency between the terminology that's used not only by officers but also in the laboratory and also in court, to make sure that everyone in that chain understands those terms, and to try and produce faster, more actionable intelligence to investigators as soon as possible, ideally in 48 hours, not just for urgent and priority cases. So to do this, we need to better develop integrated and national solutions. It's not just about being able to do this on a local scale. It's got to be about doing this across a nation and in a consistent way, sharing the what works, putting champions in place to pilot new technologies, to pilot and implement new practices, new processes, new policies, and really evaluating whether that works, what impact those changes actually have, and then being able to provide empirical evidence and data to other forces that help them understand what the value of this change and the potential short-term hard work, what value and gain that will be for them in terms of resource improvements and funding, and also potentially successful criminal justice outcomes as well. And to ensure that then a more holistic and consistent approach is being across the nation and even internationally as well. So some of my ideas for timely action in the UK around creating accessible training materials, creating visualized workflows to help everybody in the chain understand which items should be registered into a database, which ones should be submitted to a lab for analysis, providing feedback across all of the criminal justice professionals, and streamlining some of the roles, and working out who is the best person to actually do each of the step of the process, and to try and bring key stakeholders back together. In the UK, we've had a very disparate network across the UK in terms of firearm related crime and provision, with forensic science providers, police forces tendering for those forensic science provisions, and then also having NABIS, which is paid for by all of the forces. So trying to improve timeliness and effectiveness, potentially by bringing those back together. Obviously that one's more of a long-term solution and would require a lot of funding, but some of these solutions could be relatively quick to implement and could have quite big gains on a local but also national. I'd really love to hear what your actions and your thoughts are about how we and you could improve timeliness and effectiveness within your organisation or within the criminal justice system more holistically. And hopefully we can do that this afternoon in our firearm investigation workshop and action planning event. If you're watching a recording of this, please do get in touch with me. Again, I'd love to hear your ideas, your experiences, and to see if we can work together, not only in the UK but internationally, to try and share and solve the similar barriers and challenges that we all seem to be facing. So there is also more information that can be found on our Research for Justice blog. So I've been blogging about my Churchill Fellowship, incredibly slowly, I'm sorry, but also some of the research that we did within low gun crime counties in the UK, as an announcement's just been made on the Forensic Capability Network's December newsletter. And so you can access the newsletter via the link and request a copy of that report as well that we did between ourselves and NABIS. Please do get in touch if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.